Hi, Paul. How you doing? Long time no speak, mate. It's been a while.
I know it's been a while, man. How you doing anyway?
I'm well, thank you. I'm well, thanks. But I'm not as well as you and my missus because obviously last Thursday, for the first time in 22 years, Scotland have finally qualified for a major football tournament. How does it feel, mate?
No, I watched it. I watched the penalties. We're Scottish. We don't do things easy, do we? We like to go a roundabout way of doing it. So like, I remember watching France '98, and we had Brazil in our group, and they absolutely hosed us. So, like in my lifetime, I'll see them going to two major events, and try to get my daughters involved. Like, oh, come and see this. This is historical, and they weren't that bothered. But for me, myself, man, I was shouting at the TV. Football still invokes an emotion from me, so it was quite a happy experience.
Oh no, I can imagine so. So my fiance is Scottish, and my kids are going to be Scottish. My kids whenever I have them. So I was rooting for you guys to
Yes.
qualify. But as you said, you don't do it the easy way. I mean, to concede in the 89th minute, that's the most Scottish thing, Scotland thing ever. But you got there in
I
the
know.
end, and that's all that
It,
matters.
it's crazy, isn't it, man? It's like we like the fairy tale stories for Scotland don't really work out that well. They like to throw a spanner in the works because football wise, all the players work well together and they're all high level players. When it just came to that last 10, 15 minutes, they lost that lackluster that they had for the first 70 plus minutes.
Okay, so moving on from that, but I'm sure we'll get back to it eventually because in the summer, I think it's June 18th. It's going to be England versus Scotland. So I'll be
Yep.
sure to hit you up before before that happens. So moving on.
Yeah, please do.
So finally, it's I'm trying to think how long it's been since you first fought Shogun. Well, anyway, it's been a long time, but you're finally getting your hands
It's
on
been it was 1 year yesterday.
1 year yesterday already. It doesn't feel like a year. It seems like maybe the fight took place a couple months ago, but I suppose that's just how 2020 has been, or like the last 12
I know.
months, everything's just like
It's
molded
been
into
crazy.
one.
It's
So,
been it's been bonkers.
so how have your preparations for this fight camp been, especially given the whole tier system and training in Scotland and everything?
I know. Unfortunately, we're in lockdown at the moment, but everything else has been relatively good. Touch wood, everything went really, really smoothly. We had our last fight in Abu Dhabi, and we just tagged right onto the back of that. I'm not one of these guys who has an off season where it's
Yeah.
right. I'm going to take 2 to 3 weeks off, and I'm going to just eat what I want, drink what I want. For me, after that fight, I went straight back to the gym with no fight in line, and I just started working on areas that I felt that I can work on. Always working in my conditioning because I always try to. Every single fight, I try to put a better version of me across, and the only way I can do that is by training. So me and my coach, we sat down, we looked at certain areas where he wanted to work, and then we got the call for the Shogun fight, and then we started working specific skills that we felt would enhance our performance against him. And for the last from the summer, that's all we've done is fight Shogun in the gym. I've got training partners who I'll talk about that in a minute. We made a wee bubble, so we had people who were self isolating, and we were only having contact with a very few people, their families and my families, and that way we were able to train under Scottish guidelines where like professional athletes can train.
Yeah.
So we done that, and we had them mimicking how Shogun Rua moves, and when my coach Brian was holding pads, he was moving like Shogun, and it's just like these visualizing Shogun standing in front and the way he's moving, and it helped massively. But the camp was a very, very good camp, one of the best camps we've done. And it's always a bonus when you can get through a camp and there's no injuries and you come out the other end and you feel energised. Because there is, in the past, been a few camps where I've left my best rounds in the gym,
Yeah.
where my actual performance, my night performance, was left in the gym.
Okay, and interesting. You said that you've for this fight you've had your sparring partners and even your pad man specifically move like Shogun. Have you been having them try to emulate his best form when he was in Pride and when early in the UFC, because every time people seem to write off Shogun, and myself included, I've written him off many times and saying he should hang it up. He rolls back the years and does something that's similar to when he was in his pride. So have you been pride when he was in his prime? Sorry. So have you been having your training partners drill some of those movements?
With regards to Shogun, we've seen him change so much from his days in Pride.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's still a very experienced guy, and he can turn it on and he can turn it off. So with regards to actually trying to mimic him from back then, we're looking at previous fights, like the last 5 fights, because he's been very, very successful in there. He is a five wins in his last 5 fights. He's undefeated in his last 6 fights. I think one of them's a draw. Prior to that, it was Anthony Smith who went for that title shot. So he's on a bit of a tear, to believe it or not. And I wouldn't be surprised that he's potentially set up a title fight after this fight. Like, him looking forward, that's probably what he's looking at. He's arranged to have a title shot with the UFC. I don't know this for certain, but a guy that's used to be the Grand Prix world champion, he was a UFC champion, why would he not give him another title shot? The only problem is that I am trying to stop him. I am not going to stop him. I will stop him. Last fight we fought wasn't my night. I didn't get the nod. It was a draw, and I think sometimes that worked out pretty good for me, because it allows me then to get a full fight camp and fight Shogun Rua again. You know, sharing the octagon with a legend like Rua is every fighter in the roster would love to do that, and I'm getting to do that twice with him.
And like going back to that night in it was in Sao Paulo, I believe. I remember speaking to you before the fight, and you said that you weren't going to let the nerves and the mystique of Shogun affect you. But when you got in the octagon that night, did you all have a moment to yourself where you thought to yourself, "Holy shit, I'm about to fight Shogun. I'm about to fight one of my idols"?
No, I never had that feeling. I sort of came back from it. The only sort of thing I remember of that walkout and getting into that octagon was, as I'm walking out, there was a fan, and it was clear English. When there's loads of cheers and jeers in Portuguese or Brazilian, when you hear in English, and it was the English words were, "You're going to die, Craig," and I remember that, and I'm walking in, and I felt so relaxed. And then what made it even easier was his song was, he came out to Queen, Under Pressure. Now, I was so far from under pressure in that fight. It was that song just lifted me up a little bit more. And when he came walking into the octagon, he was just a man standing in front of me. His mystique, him being Shogun Rua, was not there. It was just a man, and he was blocking me for my next step, and that's the way I looked at it, and it worked for me. And I'm going to the same attitude to this. He's just a man. He's 30. He's at the back end of 30s, so that kind of falls into my plan, my favour. I'm hungry. I want to get that title shot. That's what I see in my goals and in my head and everything that I'm doing now, putting my body through the tough camps, going back to back with fight camps so that I can get to that title shot. That is what I'm looking for.
And I was moving on from the fight itself. I know you said you specifically had people drilling for Shogun, but were there certain things that he did in the fight that kind of surprised you, that you thought, okay, maybe he wouldn't be able to do, given that he's now towards the end of his career, and that you're now trying to, that you've implemented into your game plan this time around?
Yeah, you know, when you're up against somebody as skilled as Shogun, like, let's be honest, we've seen him knock people out, we've seen him submit people. I was quite taken aback that I was able to dominate, because I felt like I dominated that fight. Like, regardless of what other people say or what pundits or cornermen or fight fans say, I believe that I dominated that fight. I showed that in the stand-up, and he lay on top of me. So I was quite taken aback that I'm able, and it gave me this wee bit of confidence, because you always have these doubts in the back of your mind, like, am I ready? 3 weeks notice, or it was 2 weeks notice. Am I ready? Have I done enough? And in that fight, when I got in and I started unloading onto them, they all left. And moving into this fight, my self-efficacy with regards to taking him down, I managed to do that. With regards to stopping him from submitting me, there was no submission attempts from him. His takedowns he managed to get on me were made. His takedowns were established by me making a mistake. So going into this fight, my efficacy is through the roof. But you still need to remember that this is Shogun. He can turn it on.
Yeah. And interesting fact, and I don't know if this has been brought up to you ahead of this fight, because you touched on the topic of Shogun's submission prowess there. But if you were to win this fight via submission, you'd claim the record for the most submissions in UFC light heavyweight history. Are you aware of that?
Yeah, for the last fight, I was joint with John Jones. There was 3 or 4 fighters who were all joint for 5th. And this would take me to being the most submissions. I also hold the most triangles in the UFC. Triangle wins by the UFC, another submission. So I've got a couple of records. I've also got the latest 3-round submission in London against Magomedov Ankalaev. So I've got a couple of these sort of, these statistical records, and they do mean something to me. As a fighter, you want to be like, I'm at the top of this list, I'm at the top of this list. But the only list you really want to be a top of is the number 1 contender spot.
Yeah, that Ankalaev one, you left it late. I remember tweeting on the night. I was there on the night, and like you blew the roof off the place with that last gasp submission. But I think it was like 0.3 of a second that you had left, that he had left for that, and that's still for me one of the craziest finishes that I've seen in UFC history. So
the same for myself. Like that'll go down like till this weekend. That'll go down as my greatest victory, because to date that's just been one of these up and down roller coasters. It evoked so many emotions. My contract was in the balance of not getting renewed. If I'd lost that fight, that'd have been 3 losses on my contract. My first contract, and then looking back, I'm now in my 3rd contract with the UFC, and I'm in the top 15 in the light heavyweight division.
Yeah, and in December will be your 4-year anniversary that you've been in the UFC. Yep,
it's been a quick time. All together, I've only done this sport for 8 years, maybe 8.5 years, and it's been a very, very short career that I have had. When you compare myself to Shogun Rua, who's been when I was still in school, he was fighting.
That's crazy when you put it into that perspective. Because what you're 31, you're the same age as me, I think. Yeah, so
32. Yep. So he's been in the UFC longer than I've been doing the sport, and he's been fighting longer than I've even thought about doing the sport. His time within this sport has been such a long time. He's a Hall of Famer. He last year got like one of the greatest fights in the Hall of Fame for the UFC against
and Dan Henderson fight, I believe.
Yep, and so this is like, I know how big an opportunity this is, and there's so many people out there who want this fight. There's so many people who want to fight Shogun Rua because he is a name within the UFC, and he will always will be.
And obviously, you were last in action against Hamza Murad Antigulov in July, but Shogun was also in action on that card in the co-main event against Little Nog. Was it a bit frustrating that obviously I know you wanted the rematch pretty much straight away, so then you could settle the score once and for all, but was it frustrating that you were both fighting on the same card and that you weren't settling the score?
Yes and no. A year for myself, I'd love to get straight back in there and fight him. But giving me another year just improves my skill. That's all that done. That year just made me a better version of who I was. And we've seen that in the last fight against Antigulov, who managed to take me down, but it just highlighted how good my submission game is. Because this is an opponent in Antigulov who is a master of sambo, who has a very relentless pressure, and his wrestling's up there with some of the best in the division. Right, he didn't have the result his last fight, but he's still a very dangerous opponent, and I just showed that my jiu-jitsu is what sets me above everyone else in this division. I am a submission expert in the division, where you've got guys who have knockout experts or like wrestlers or grinders. I'm the guy that does the submissions, and I'm the guy that can pull it off when his back's against the wall.
One thing I wanted to ask you about, which you touched on there, you said, but obviously you have aspirations of getting a title shot, and now you're ranked 15th. But I mean, like you said, if you get an impressive win over Shogun, your stock will rise significantly. And with the division being wide open as it is, like, I know we've just got a new champion in Jan Blachowicz, but the division is pretty much wide open. So, I mean, if all things go well in 2021, well, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that a title shot could soon be in the offing.
You know, it could be Scotland win the Euros and Paul Craig. This is what we could be saying this time next year. But, you know, I have the ambition to achieve that. And I do believe that my skill set is able to see me there. I've not had a lot of miles on the clock, whereas you look at some of the fighters who've had a long careers and they've taken loads of damage, whereas I haven't taken that much damage when you watch my fights back. Yeah. I'm relentless with regards to not getting hit, and even now I've still got my wits about me, whereas some fighters in there don't have that. And I think that's what sets me apart from other fighters. That and my submission game, and the never die attitude. You know, it doesn't matter if we've seen people quit in the octagon, and the London fight against Ankalaev is a prime example. Like, I could have easily have quit there and found an escape route out of that fight and just gave up, but it's not in my DNA. And even when I've been beaten for 15 minutes, I can still turn it on.
All right, Paul, final question from me. After all the hard rounds preparing for Shogun, and I'm sure your team have got his game down to a T, and with the benefit of having shared the ring with him for 3 rounds, how do you foresee this fight playing out?
You know, every time someone asks me a question about how I'm going to finish a fight, regardless if it's Shogun Rua or any, I always say I would love to knock them out, a big bump, put them down and flatten them in one dig. But I'm more of a grinder. I'm the guy who takes the submission. I'm the jiu-jitsu guy, so it's going to have to be submission, probably second round.
All right, Paul, thank you very much for the time. As always, I really do appreciate it. Let's not leave it so long next time.
Yeah, man. Anytime you want to chat, just drop me a message, man. But listen, safe back home, man.
I'm stuck in the house, dude. Yeah, but no. You have a safe journey when you head back, and good luck on Saturday night.
Thanks very much, man. I'll speak to you soon.
Take care.